And so Dr. Dre is saying that albums should have one producer, or he prefers that albums have one producer for the entire project. Now, I believe this interview was a recent interview with Stephen A. Smith, where he and Snoop Dogg sat down, and he kind of declared how he doesn't like albums that have multiple producers. Now, I got questions, but let's look at the content first, and then we can jump in and see what you gentlemen think.
What would y'all tell an artist today that, you're an aspiring artist, you want to make it?
Be original. Find your voice. Find your production sound. Find your ear for who you are, and be original. Even if it ain't hitting, stay you.
Find your collaborator. I don't like the fact that there's like 9 different producers on one album. I like the idea of one producer on one album. Continuity is everything.
Yeah, where did that come from? Where did it come from where you got cats that want to be with 9 different producers on one album and stuff like that? When the hell did that start?
I don't know. I don't like it.
Yeah.
Y'all know where that started.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, jump in there.
Well, it started on Nas's album, was the actual first album where they used multiple producers. But I appreciate what Dr. Dre is saying, but at the same time, if we're waiting for albums from Dr. Dre to produce the whole album, we're going to be waiting quite a long time. And it depends on also the artist itself, my personal opinion, because if you have an artist that has a working relationship with his producer and it's you want it all to sound the same. It's a journey. It's a musical journey that you both are going through. Mm-hmm. And I can see it being one producer. Multiple producers allow an artist to express themselves different ways and not to be so locked into a pocket. Like you'll have, for example, Nas again. You had Nas on his I Am album, which isn't one of the best albums, but
Dr. Knockboot didn't
Don't do
fit.
that. Don't do that.
Dr. Knockboot and You Can't See Me Tonight. Now, those are choices or chances he took on that album that weren't, they didn't work out in his favor.
But that chance wouldn't be there if he worked with one producer.
Exactly. So, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I don't really see a fault in it. I do like when an artist locks in with a producer and actually makes a whole project, but I don't mind them choosing other producers to work on it as well.
Lone, I want to hear I have a list that I found, but I want to hear what you think. At being a producer and you've been a part of both.
Yeah. I again, as a producer who primarily works with one artist on projects, I prefer that as well because I feel like the continuity is just more there. A lot of it has to do with collaboration too, and just the relationships that you have with the person that you're working with. And, I think it's less about how many names are on something as long as the group that's a part of it is locked in, right? So I think the conversation comes down to one producer because it's a lot easier for one artist and one producer to become locked in together as you're creating something.
Right.
But if you think of like a Kendrick album, he's got multiple producers, but they're all locked in. If you think about like the Mac Miller records when they would go somewhere, or a Kanye West album when he would go somewhere and he would bring all his people and they would work on something together even, regardless of if I even think that it still fits that mold. I think that's the approach. I think it's less about one producer. But then you think about like Common and Pete Rock, one very specific sound. You think about
Pete Rock and CL Smooth.
Yeah, Pete Rock, CL Smooth. But even like when Dilla worked with the Soulquarians on Common stuff back in the day, or Blue in Exile, or Blue and Fashawn, or the Alchemists on whole projects and stuff like that. The Derringer. Now, granted, you can go off and you can get a Conductor Williams and you can get an Alchemist over here, and you can find those people, but they're in the same type of realm. So I think you can go outside of it a little bit, but there's something to be said still about like the one-on-one that I just like, and
cohesiveness.
Yeah, I think it's harder. It's a little bit harder to achieve the more people that you bring into it.
I think the way I look at it is I'm with you on, and I'm kind of with Dre on the one producer and the artist, because experiencing that is a totally different experience, and you feel like when you get your baby and it's done, it's different because we've worked through this together. Concepts, artwork, arrangement, track listing, all that. So being a part of that that's special for sure. But I've also been a part of great records where the artist says, okay, so I'm trying to get to 11 or 12, but I need 2 from you for this. This is what I came to you for. Mm-hmm. I love being that person to be able to come in and close and say, hey, you needed me for these 2 to make sure that the album sounds like it does.
For sure.
I love being in that position because I know, to Lone's point about the locked in part, the other producers have done what they were supposed to do. So when I hear the other records, I'm like, yeah, I see why you came. Let's go ahead and fill these holes. So it's kind of, it kind of goes both ways. But there's a list I found that has a lot of records that are classic, if not classic, great records that are only with one producer or production team. Now, some of these, obviously, we got Doggy Style, Enter the 36 Chambers, 400 Degrees, Mad. How do you say this, Terry?
Mad Villainy.
I always say it wrong. Thank you. College Dropout, Moment of Truth. Who else? Pinata, 444, No ID, Strictly Business, EPMD. That's
Eric Sermon.
Eric Sermon. I was going to say Eric Onassis. Daytona. So just a list of people like that. So these are dope records that have one sound that actually works. So it works, but I'm just kind of in between because I've experienced both.
I mean, because, but you also have the blueprint.
Yeah.
You have, majority of Jay-Z, you have Illmatic. You have these records that,
Black Album.
Yeah, I mean, so when you, and that was the theme of the Black Album, initially it's supposed to be 12 producers, 12 songs, 12 producers.
Yep.
I know it didn't work out exactly how it was mapped out. I remember seeing that advertisement.
Yeah.
It was like, track 1, Dr. Dre, premiere. Like, there are people who were actually advertised as perhaps being on the album, didn't make it. But of course, like, he didn't have Ninth Wonder on that initial advertisement. He made the album. I think it's more about sometimes the MC creating the cohesiveness. Does he have a theme for the album? Is he trying to, say something specific regardless of the production? And I understand the uniformity that comes from having perhaps a DJ Premier or, a Hit Boy, work on your entire album. And I think that's a dope concept. I think that's something that really worked for Nas, with the majority of the King's Disease series. You can't say, oh, I locked in with one producer, but, you find yourself them not being able to draw out of you what you need to reach your artistic vision, But, as cool as what Dre has to say is, and I feel him on a certain level, I was like, what's the last time Dre, I mean, he's a situation where he oversees production. Maybe he's in there twisting knobs saying, hey, let's move this here, move this there. But, Dre didn't produce. But depending on who you're talking to.
If there was ever one person, though, that could speak to being the main person that's put classics out, he's the person that can speak. And one of the things,
I talk about previous to that, the Aftermath run, Dr. Dre's most underrated work was for Above the Law. I can't remember. There was another group. Of course, I'm sorry, the DOC. How could I forget that? That's some of, and the second NWA album. Like, that's some of his best work. Everybody thinks about the stuff that he did, when he had all the collaborators, when it got to working on the Eminem records and, doing the stuff for, the Dr. Dre 2001. But, honestly, to me, just being old or oldish, the things that make Dre legendary, all happened before the Chronic. And those are the things that he did. I mean, Yellow was there. I'm not taking any credit away from him, but of course, it's kind of a unified vision, things that he did with Yellow.
He spoke to it in his interview. He did mention, he was like, when they asked, what advice would you give? If you go through this clip, he says, get collaborators. To y'all point about teams. Mm-hmm. He did say, get collaborators and work with
collaborators.
Collaborators, thank you. But he did say, learn how to produce an entire record, being the main person that points and directs what the team does. Yeah, you can still be that person with the team and still be credited as the producer.
Yeah, no, and with that and knowing how, the stuff, done with Mailman and, even Scott Storch.
Yeah.
But you can tell Dr. Dre is all over that.
Yeah.
I liked those albums, but even before we talk about Illmatic, but there was always Battle Cat, Marley Marl,
Wick,
the people who did those early LL records.
Bomb Squad.
There was more than one. Bomb Squad. Well, they would do the entire Public Enemy record.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But they also stepped out. Like at one point, they were working on Public Enemies, like The Enemy Strikes Back, Ice Cube, and Belle Biv DeVoe all at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, it says something like that makes them more underrated and, and very influential all at the same time.
Can you make an argument that albums that are made by one producer are better cohesive projects than albums that are made without one?
I mean, essentially that would be subjective, right?
Yeah, it would be.
Because, I mean, we have classic albums that have one producer or one production team, and then you have a good Kid, Mad City which isn't one producer. I mean, he works with. See, this is the difference with Kendrick. He works with actual musicians. So Terrace Martin and his crew of
Thundercat, all them.
all of them. So as far as style wise, it sounds cohesive, but it's not one producer.
Soundwave is a big part of that too, though, because
Dahi,
yeah, they are the anchors of that. And then to Terry's point, the rest of those guys come in and just take it to the next level. It is subjective, but that is a damn good question because we got evidence on both. We got evidence on both sides.